Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone can hear me. Please fill out the attendance register. As soon as the time lapses over there, we'll get started with today's tutorial. Basically, to be looking at implementations of if statements. If we have time, we'll look at text boxes and input boxes, and maybe some while loops as well. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome to today's tutorial. We're going to be going through if statements once more, but we'll start from the beginning of a Visual Studio project. I've noticed a few of you are still using the wrong .NET framework and creating the wrong solutions. So if your assistant cannot open your solution, unfortunately, we cannot mark it. So you need to make sure you create the right one. So This is, let's go and create a project the right way. So create a new project. So over here, you'll see this is what most of you are choosing. This is the wrong Visual Studio application. It says Windows Form app. It's not the right one. If you click on this and click on next, you'll see that call it test. Next. You'll see that the framework that it's using is .NET 6.0 long-term support. Okay, remember in the beginning we said there's two things you need for Informatics 1A, which is Visual Studios and the UJ Grid. Do you remember that? Okay, .NET 6.0 does not support the UJ Grid. So if you created using .NET 6.0, you will not have access to the UJ Grid. Granted, we haven't gotten there yet, but we are eventually going to introduce the UJ Grid as a control on your form. And if you're using 6.0, it will not work. The assistants are marking, some of them are marking from home, and they may have different versions to Visual Studios that you have. So if they don't have 6.0 support on their devices, they will not be able to open your solution. What does that mean? It means if they can't open it, they can't mark it, you're not going to get any marks. Okay, so please do not use Windows Form app. So go back. Over here, the one that you want, the one that you should be using, if you scroll down, there is Windows Form app, .NET Framework in brackets. The one with .NET Framework in brackets is the one that you're supposed to be using when you are creating solutions for Informatics 1A. Nothing else. Okay, Windows Form app with .NET Framework. Next, call it for my desktop for now. Okay, here's another issue I've picked up with some of your practicals. What do you name your practical? Do you name it? I'm going to use that. So I'll just. How many of you do this? It's S. Argumenting. How many of you name it like that? That is incorrect. The curly braces that I put in the question paper to say S, curly braces student number, the curly braces just show you that this is where your student number goes. Do not include the curly braces, because when you save it, did you notice that when you save it and upload it onto Eve, it's no longer the same name? It has D7 or B7 something. It's Visual Studios trying to figure out what that curly brace means. If you are lucky enough, it's just going to rename it to B7 and student number. If you're unlucky, it's not going to do anything. It's going to keep it as a curly brace or as an unknown character, and we will not be able to open your practical. So please do not include those curly braces. Simply just S, then your student number, underscore, S, your student number, underscore, whatever it is that we said the rest of your project name should be. Good. Are there any questions with those two things? Which type of Visual Studio project to create and how to name that Visual Studio file? Cool. Okay, I'm gonna name it what I wanted to name it. Tuesday tutorial, 8th of the 3rd. Right, and over here you'll see it will be on .NET Framework 4.7.2 or 4.7.3. It really does not matter. As long as you're using the one with .NET Framework in brackets, it should be compatible with the one that the assistants have on their computers and in the labs. There's a question from online that says, is the S uppercase or lowercase? really does not matter. I think it's lowercase in the question, in the practical question paper. So it really does not matter. If you want to make it uppercase, you're more than welcome to do so. Okay, then we click on create. So those are the two things I wanted to clarify. With creation, please create the one with .NET framework in brackets. I cannot emphasize that enough. Again, this projector screen is not big enough to accommodate everything, so let's try and make it a little bit smaller. I don't need the output for now, so I can cancel the output. Okay, let me just minimize this, minimize that, so we can see the whole form. So typically, this is what you will be presented with. In the slides this week, we're working on adding up numbers, right? So I'll just rename this properties. The text will say add numbers, and the form name will be, form name will be, obviously the prefix is FRM. Really does not matter what else I name it, but I'll just name it FRM add. Good. So once you do that, this is the first thing you're supposed to do with any Visual Studio application, because there's an error that's going to come up. First thing you do is you try running it right after changing the form name. You will run into an error. We have explained this error in class, where Visual Studios has tried to change the form name everywhere except in one place, which is the design. So as soon as you run into this, you can just click I, click no. And at the bottom there, error list, you will have that error that says form 1 is not a member of Tuesday _ tutorial 803. Basically telling you it's looking for form 1, it can't find form 1. Do we have a form 1 in this solution? No, we don't. We renamed it to FRM add. So simply just double click on that error. It will open up the designer, take you to the line where there's an issue. It says Global Tuesday. It's looking for form 1. There is no form 1 in the whole solution. Because I changed it from form 1 to FRM add. Let's change it there. Save it. As soon as you've saved it and the line has disappeared, you close the designer because you don't want to be changing anything in there, and try run it again. This time it should run. Okay, I'm not always going to be showing you this error because eventually our tutorials are going to get long and complicated. I will not have the time to create a Visual Studio project and solve this for you. So is everyone on the same page? Do we all understand how to deal with that error? It's running on the other page. Here it is. So right now there are no more Visual Studio's errors. We are ready to start coding. Okay, so we've covered Visual Studios, which Visual Studios project to make. Are there any questions with that? Online and in person, yes. When I change the form name. The form name. No, it's not debugging. It's just renaming the form.
I tried to rename the form, but Visual Basic just sent me straight to Chrome and gave me the I don't know what it's called, but it just gave me the list of errors and how to fix them.
Did you click on the error or did you click on the error code?
I clicked on the error.
Chances are you clicked on the error code. So can I let's see. See if I can't. No. Let's see if I can't reproduce that error and change the name. Add new. Yeah, it should crash because I've changed the name again. You see at the bottom there is a little X, can everyone see that? And then there's a code, there's a description. What this gentleman did is most probably clicked on the error code. So if you click on the error code, it will open a tab explaining to you what had happened. Yes, But that's you said that's not what you did. When I asked if you clicked on the error message, you said no. Yes, but that's what you did. Okay, so don't do this because this is basically Visual Studios gave you that code, right? You usually get if you play Xbox, PlayStation, or basically just any device rather, or any gaming console, they're usually, or any computer for that fact, there's usually an error code that comes with what had happened. It will say something went wrong, error 0x, whatever, right? Those error codes are, you don't understand what that error code means, but there's someone somewhere who actually knows what that error code means. They actually communicate using just error codes, right? For those of you that have done IT before or have some knowledge, what does it mean when you open a web page and it says 404? What does 404 mean? Web page not found, right? So basically the universal language of codes, 404 means what you're looking for has not been found. So the same thing here, it's easier for some developers to decipher numbers than it is words. So if they just see the error code, they know what that error code means. If you don't know what that error code means, if you click on it, it will usually take you to documentation. So this is what we call documentation. You can read up on what that problem is, but that's not what you want to do. So in future, don't click on the code, right? Even if you hover over the code, you'll notice it says, if you click on this, I'm going to take you to this web address. That's not what you want. You don't want the web address. Click on the description rather, right? Double click on the description, it will take you to the line of code where that error exists. Does that clarify your question? Okay, are there any other questions? There's a question that says, are we allowed to leave it as form 1? Does form 1 follow the prefix rule that we've given you? Does it? What is the prefix for forms? What should a form be named? FRM, whatever name you want to give it, right? So if you leave it as just form 1, are you adhering to that rule? No, you're not. That's the first reason why you shouldn't keep it as form 1. Secondly, if I tell you I've created a visual basic application and the form is called form 1, do you have any idea what this application does? Is it descriptive enough? No, it's not. So you need to convert it, you need to change it to FRM something. That something should make it, it should make it somewhat of a description. So with mine, it just says FRM add. So from FRM add, you know it's a form that is going to add at some point, or it has something to do with adding, right? The new part was just to show this gentleman that what he was doing was incorrect. But yeah, it needs to have the prefix FRM. If it doesn't, it's wrong. So you can't keep it, you can't leave it as just form 1. Okay, let me close this. And let's go back. So again, we've discussed 3 things. We've discussed what type of visual basic application to create. Are we all on the same page with that? Okay, naming it. The issues that you guys have experienced during naming with the curly braces. Are we all on the same page with that? Okay, the error you get when you rename your form and how to fix it. Is everyone on the same page with that? Okay, online people, are we all on the same page? Cool, I'm going to take that as a yes. So let's move on. Yes, I haven't started any coding. So that's why deal with this error before you start any coding. Because if another error had to come up, you know for sure it's not that one because you've already solved that one. Okay. So just like in the practical, in the slides, we're going to try and create a system that adds numbers. So we don't know how many numbers to add. So we're going to have a text box and a label. Properties. How many numbers? Descriptive enough. Let's move No. Let's move this over here. How many numbers are we adding? We'll have a button and the text will just say add. Try change the name to button add. I haven't changed this text box. The name of the text box to txt numbers, and text box text label. Enter a number here. That was the name, my bad. Properties, not name. I don't really care about the label's name. I care about the label's text. And that is wrong. Okay, let me try and make my form just fit the page. Okay, so over here, to kind of distinguish the difference between a text box that inputs and a text box that outputs, you can, in the properties part of a text box, you can go to the read-only part and make it true. So once you say read-only is true, it kind of grays it out so that a user knows there's no information that's going to be added there. Did I change this? Properties. Text box 1. Input num. Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that. Try run it and see if I've created any issues. Not really, it still runs, but as you can see, the second one there, I can't add anything into it because it's a read only. I've only made it a read only, and you can't input information. But these two, I can still input information in there, and I can still press the button, but it does nothing. Okay, stop that from running. There's a question that says, will we be penalized for not changing the design name of the label to LBL something? I'm referring to the text of the label. No, you don't necessarily need to. Yes, the text needs to be changed, because if you don't change the text, does the user know what information they need to input into the text box? No, they don't. Do you need to change the name? No, you don't. You can change the name, but no, you don't. Why aren't we changing the name? Do we ever refer to the label in the backend? No. So there's no reason to actually change that name. We don't change any property of a label in the backend. So you can just leave it as label 1, label 2, label 3. But the text, on the other hand, needs to be changed because it tells the user what information they need to input. Okay. So let's double click on the button. Before we start coding, we need our option statements. Okay, once we have our option statements, we need to create our variables. variables. So what's the first variable? I think we'll need, it's too zoomed in. Try zoom out a little bit. Okay. And hide that. Okay, it's too zoomed out. Okay, let's leave it at that. So we're going to need okay, can anyone think of anything else we'll need as far as the code that we were working with this week is concerned, last week rather? So we're just adding up numbers. Is there anything else we need? There's a question online that says, I guess we will not be penalized for keeping the name. No, you will not be. It's fine. So what I'm going to do now is something called initialization, right? I'm going to go back to the form, double click on the form itself. You'll notice now I've got my button add over there. I'll just remove that, get it back at a later stage. Now I've got something called private sum FRM add new button load. What do you think that is? So with a button, go back, double click, it says BT and add.click. Tells you when you click BT, basically, you know, when you click BT and add, all the code that is in between there will be executed. So what about this one? New FRM add new underscore load. Yes. It's going to be what's going to happen, the code that will run as soon as the form loads. But talking about form loads is when you click on this start button and this appears. This is basically the form loading. Good. So we're going to stop that. In the form load, what we want is sum should be equal to 0. We are initializing sum to 0. Counter is equal to 0. We're initializing counter to 0. Num numbers will also equal to 0. Okay, we just need to initialize those three. Equal to 0. You'll see why that becomes important when we do reset. Okay, all of them is 0. We're happy with that, save everything. But now we want to start using them. When we start using them, we're looking into the button itself and we're saying, okay. Yeah, my bad. Sorry, just give me a second. Okay, so now we're looking for, come on, scroll up. We're looking for num numbers. So num numbers will be equal to convert the integer txt numbers dot text and that's how many numbers we want. Okay, maybe I need more buttons. No, that's fine. Let's leave it at that. So that's how many thingies we want to add. That's how many numbers we want to add, right? And I can even use so many numbers I want to add. I can even use an if statement for this to make sure that instead of having two different buttons, so my logic was I want to have one button to store the number of numbers and another button to do the adding. I can do it in both, but I don't want there to be a condition each. I don't want it to run number of numbers each time that I press the button. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Someone said no. Is there anyone who said no? Okay, so let me just finish it off. So we need num numbers, right? Need num numbers. We want to know how many numbers we are getting. From there, we need to get numbers. We need to get the first number, second number, third number from the user, depending on how many numbers we said we wanted. And that is num numbers and then number. Number is equal to convert to integer, txt num input dot text. Good. And then that's when we're going to have our if statement to say if counter is less than num numbers. Then if counter is less than num numbers, then okay, actually, yeah, we can leave that. If counter is less than num numbers, then sum is equal to sum plus number. And we can say number plus equal 1. So what I did in line 22, so what I did in line 22 and what I did in line 23 is the same thing. So what's in line 23 is shorthand. So instead of saying counter is equal to counter plus 1, if I say counter plus equal 1, it's going to add 1 to counter. So it's a shorthand for that. And if counter is less than num numbers, then sum is equal to sum plus number, and counter is going to be added by 1. And if counter is equal to num numbers, then txt, I forgot what I called it. No, I did not change the name of it, actually. Did I? No. Yeah, it's still called textbox2. So I need to go change this. Right click, properties, name textbox2, txt output should be fine. Then txt output dot text should equal to convert to string sum. Okay, this is code you've seen already. We've dealt with this code most of last week, right? So let's try and see what happens. Start it. So the issue right now is, let's say num numbers, right? I'm saying I want 2 numbers, and here's the first number is 2. Add. So what happened there? When I clicked on add, it took num numbers, it took number, it did that whole thing, it added it. Because 2 is bigger than 0 at the moment, there's nothing that's being displayed. If I press it again, there's 4. So it basically added my first number, my second number together. The moment counter and num numbers were equal, it displayed. Everything is fine, right? Here's the issue. If it's adding to 7 now, right? As it's doing that, if I decide at some point I'm going to say 1, see what's the problem? Every time I press the button, what's the first thing it does? What's the first line under private sub BT and add? What does it do? What's the first thing my program does? It gets number, right? Do we need to get number every single time we press the button? No. We only need to get number the first time we press the button, right? So there's a problem there. How do I solve that problem? Yes. If statement that says what? If I've pressed the button before, don't ask for number. you're on the right place. So right now we can say, you see over here when we initialize num numbers to 0, right? And then the first thing we're getting is num numbers. So we can have, as the lady said over there, we can have an if statement that says if num numbers is not equal to 0. If num numbers is not equal to 0, or rather, wait, no, if num numbers is equal to 0, in this case, because we want to, if num numbers is equal to 0, ask the user for the number of numbers. Once the user gives us a number of numbers, we can even take it one step further to say txt numbers dot read only is equal to true. You don't have to do this. See if that works. Yeah, okay. So then we can save that. Sorry, it keeps on doing that. Then we can, come on, then we can save that. And then actually in the actual code, it says we get number only if over there. So now save it. And I run it. So the first time, so now I can say I'm looking for 5 numbers. And the first number is 10. The moment I say add, it took in that 5 because num numbers was 0. And then it added 10 to my sum. Okay, so again, add. I can't change this 5 anymore. It won't allow me to enter any more information. Add, and there we go, 50. So the moment this if statement, let's just go through that again. The first time I say if num numbers is equal to 0, when we start off our program, what is num numbers? 0, which allows me then to run this if statement. Once this if statement runs, I'm saying get the number of numbers from the user. After I got it, I deactivate that text box to read only so that I can't change anything. And then the next time I press the button, it says, is num numbers equal to 0? No, I've gotten a number of numbers from the user. So that if statement will never run again for as long as this program is still running. The only time it would run again is if we have a reset button that resets num numbers to 0. Then it will ask me for num numbers again. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me stop it and take questions, because this code is code you guys had. We basically went through this code twice already in class, and I'm showing you the actual implementation of it. So are we all comfortable with counter? What counter does? The point of counter. Okay, who has an issue with the code that's above right now? Yes, what problems do you have? Yeah, basically that should be easy enough to say, where are we getting that number from? Currently, where are we getting that number from? What's the function of the read-only part in the code? If you don't understand it, don't worry about it. It's nothing you need to know. Where are we getting the number from? Which control are we getting the number from? Yes, the person who said, can we clear it? Where is the information coming in from? From the numbers text box, right? From the input num. So after we get that from the input num, and we've used it, after we get the number from input num, we could simply just say Get line 25 where it says txt input num.text is equal to nothing. So if we save it and run it, then we've got, I want to add 3 numbers, and the first number is 1. So the moment I say add, it's added the 1, and the 1 has, and it's cleared that input. For me to say, okay, the second number is 2, and the third number is 3. Add. Now we're up to 6. So if I click on add, nothing happens. What actually should happen is, there is an else there, where we can add an else, where we say txt output dot text is equal to, come on, what you doing? Stopped it from running. Okay, it's complaining about something. TXT output is not declared. I used it up here. What are you saying? Okay, let me just copy it. Maybe there's a typo. Looks like there was a typo. I fixed it. Is equal to save it and let's run it. So you can see that if and that else, both of them in working. So again, how many numbers? We want 3 numbers. First number is 1. Add. So that gets rid of it. 2. Add 3. Add, and we have 6. So if I click the button again, it says you can't add any more numbers. The sum is, unfortunately, my text box is not wide enough to accommodate everything. So let's just maybe make it a little less. You can't add any more. And let's try run it again. And 2 numbers, the first number is 2, add, second number is 2, add, we have 4. Say add, and it says you can't add anymore, sum is equal to 4. So every time I click on it, it will tell me I can't add it anymore because I'm effectively done adding. Okay, so here is the code. I've essentially used one if statement to test if I've gotten my inputs yet, and if I have gotten my inputs, I deactivate that that text box. Second one is a nested if statement where I'm checking if counter is still less than num numbers. For as long as it's still less than num numbers, I'm going to get the number from the user. I'm going to empty that text box. I'm going to add that number I've just gotten to my sum. I'm going to increment counter by 1. And if counter is equal to num numbers, I'm going to show you the sum. Okay, the else part falls in if counter is not less than num numbers, then it'll tell you you've added up all the numbers you want to add, and now the output is still the same output. Questions? No questions. Everyone is happy with the code that is in front of them. Then you understand it fully and you have no issues. Yes. So, sorry, I can't hear you. I made what? So output, line 29, output is just the sum. Line 32 is basically telling you you can't add any more numbers because your count is the same as the number of numbers you said you wanted, so you can't add any more. So I don't know what do you mean, because here it is. So this is, I'm just appending the string. So I've got a string there that says you can't add any more. The sum is, and then I'm adding the sum itself. So I'm putting those two strings together. That's all. I can do it over here as well to go. Oof. Okay, so the sum is a normal string. Add sum to the sum is. It's basically what I've done. So if I save it there as well, try run it. If I say 2 again, first number is 1, add, second number is 2, add, it says the sum is 3. In this case, there is no space between those two. So I need to say the sum is, create a space, and then add 3. So let's run it again. So we have 2, 1, 1. The sum is 2. That's basically all I'm doing, just adding those two strings together. Questions? None. Okay, so we can go one step further. Instead of all of these times when I'm trying to show you something new, I have to stop the program from running and run it again. I don't want to do that anymore. So I'm just going to add properties, and this will be called reset, and the button name will be btn reset. Double click on btn reset. What am I trying to do here? I'm basically trying to get this back to what it was. I'm just going to copy these 3, copy, add them over there. And right now, because this one, I need to reset this back to its original as well. Okay, so basically what am I doing in my reset button? I'm resetting my sum back to 0 because I'm allowing the next person to use this program. I'm resetting my counter back to 0 because that's where it was originally. Resetting my num numbers to 0 and resetting my read-only property of my txt numbers back to false. So if I run it now, it says how many numbers? 3 numbers. What's the first number? 1. Add, second number is 2, add, third number is 3, add, and it says the sum is 6. If I say add again, it says you can't add anymore, but the sum is 6, right? Now I want to reset this all. Can I change the number of numbers I want here? No, it won't. It's read only. It won't allow me to change that. Can I add something here? I can, 15, but it won't do anything with that. So I want to reset the program. By clicking on reset, this is back to normal. I can change that, but those values are still there. So something else I can do to increase my reset functionality is txt num numbers dot text is equal to nothing. Txt output dot text is equal to nothing. Txt num input dot text is equal to nothing. Okay. I'm reinitializing the values to 0. I'm clearing those. Run it again the same way I did previously, and let's see what happens. So again, I'm just going to run it using the same test data. I'm going to say 3 and 1. Add 2. Add 3. Add. The sum is 6. Add again, you can't add anymore. The sum is 6. If I reset, it should clear how many numbers I have to nothing. Clear number over here. Clear everything. So now I can say I want 4 numbers. First number is 1. Add. Second number is 1. Third number is 1. Fourth number is 1. The sum is 4. The sum is 4. You can't add anymore. Reset takes me back to the original of the program. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I had to say how many numbers, and I said that, right? I add 1. Crashed. Why did it crash? Because I didn't put anything in the text box and I pressed the button. So if you read the error, it says conversion from string nothing into integer is not valid. So this is basically Visual Studio is trying to tell you, you did not put an input. There was nothing in there. I cannot convert nothing into an integer. There is no equivalent of nothing in integer form. Yes. Okay, so there's 2 parts to this. We did this the beginning, I think week 1. There is the text box itself, and there is the variable, right? So if we look at this, numbers, num numbers, what is it? Is it a variable or is it a control? It's a variable, right? So at this point, if I don't clear any of the text and I run it, and again I do 3, 1, 2, 3, add. The sum is 6, sum is 6. When I reset, right? I've reset. What is the value of num numbers now? What is the value of num numbers? 0. Okay. What is the value of num numbers text box? No, it's not. That's what I'm saying. There's the text box, there's the variable. So what we've managed to do now by resetting is we reset the variable, but the text box still has 3. So now I have that extra step of having to now clear this and write something else in there. If we reset the variable to 0, the least we can do is clear that text as well. Remove that text that was there as well in the text box. Now we make it all the same. So now if I say, now, for instance, if I say 2, and the first number is 2, I've moved on to a new cycle, but you see that my sum there still says you can't add anymore. So it's misleading information. That information shouldn't be there, because I can add again. So if I say 3, now it should say 5. You can't add anymore. So we're just making sure that we are resetting, getting rid of everything that was part of the first calculation by resetting the variables to 0 and clearing the spaces where we now want new information to be displayed. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so if I did 10, for argument's sake, if I say I wanted to add 10 numbers. The first number is 1, 2, 3. Is this fun? $55. Again, there is a way that I can make that a little bit simpler. Again, this is part of that. If you don't get it, forget about it. Where is that? No, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, I forgot how to do it. So I'm just going to leave it alone. What I was trying to do was set the focus back to the basically now that's if I say 2 and then 1, after pressing add, I wanted the blue to focus back on that. I just forgot what the code is right now, but it's still not going to make it easier. You still need to press the button multiple times. Okay, is there a way in which we can stop the button from being pressed multiple times? Is there? What could possibly stop us from pressing the button until it's done? Yes, there's a hand. How many times does an if statement execute? Once, right? Okay, but before we get to that, let's look at the other input options. So basically we can, this is a whole lot of, to avoid what that lady asked about earlier, to go, why do we need to clear the text in there as well? There's a way to go around that where you don't necessarily need to clear the text. And that is if you get rid of the text boxes. So getting rid of the text box, I'll say numbers is equal to cint. It's still save. So basically, if I do that, I can just, instead of how many numbers on there, I can just simply press on add. And then there's going to be a input box that pops up that says, how many numbers do you want to add? I want to add 3 numbers. Okay. Oh, it's broken. Why is it broken? Anyone? Why is it broken? Yes. So there's nothing from input numbers. So in numbers, the text box input num was empty. So basically, it's the same error I had earlier, saying I cannot, it says, invalid cast exception. Conversion from string, nothing. You see that there's nothing in that string? It's just 2. Conversion from nothing to integer is invalid. I cannot convert nothing into an integer. So when you get this type of error, it's because you did not put any input. Okay. So let's stop it and let's clear that as well. I'm just going to make that and let's put an input box there. number is equal to C int input box please enter a number, save. Let's go to the form. I don't need these no more. Save, run it. Build errors. Why? Where are my build errors? Did anyone see any errors? Oh, there we go. There's my build error. I don't need to set its read only to true anymore because there is no text box to be set to true anymore. I don't need to clear it because there is no text box to be cleared. Same here. I don't need to set that. I don't need to clear that. I don't need to clear that. But I do need to clear that because it still exists. Okay, cool. Let's run it again. Add numbers. So now I can say add, and it says, how many numbers would you like to add? 3 numbers. Please enter a number. 1. Please enter a number. 2. Please enter a number. 3. The sum is 6. You can't add anymore. So I've gotten rid of those text boxes with input boxes. Okay, not only can I do that, so if we reset and I say add number, you'll see that at the top of this pop-up, it still says Tuesday underscore tat 803. I can actually get rid of that by giving my input box a second parameter to say numbers, maybe. With this one, numbers to be added. If I save it, you see there's 2 parameters in this input box, right? There's how many numbers do you want to add, and numbers. There's please enter a number and numbers to be added. So if I run it, I've got, see now, it no longer has the name of the solution. It has numbers as its caption. So how many numbers do you want? 3 again. And now it says numbers to be added because it's the second input box. Enter a number 1, 2, 3. Number is 6. You can't add anymore. Okay. As far as giving the user information, is there more that we can do? Look at this 6. Looking at this, is there anything we can do to this to give the user more information? Yes. How many numbers are left? Do we know how many numbers are left? Okay, but that's more work. With what we have already, can we give them more information? We can give them counter, right? So you can simply just say, in this input box that says, please enter a number, please enter number Does that make sense? Please enter number. Oh, it's at the bottom there. It says, please enter number and counter. So it's going to say, please enter number and give you whatever number you're on at that point in time. which is going to be a bit, let's see, add. How many do you want to add? I want to add 6 numbers. And it says, please enter number 0. Okay. I killed it. Oh no. Number 1. Now I killed it. So our count is not necessarily on the same level as our numbers, is it? No, it's not. So there's 2 things we can do about that. The first thing would be please enter number counter plus 1. Or we could just simply, is there anything we're doing with the counter besides just incrementing it? Are we using it anywhere else? Not really. So now this is where sequence comes in. I could just simply, first thing I do is increment count. Then if I run it, let's say add how many? Let's do 6 again. 6. But number 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, number 4 is 4, 5 is 5, 6 is 6, and that's apparently 21, and I can't add anymore. Okay, you see that it tells you, please enter number 1, 2, 3. You know, you wanted 6 numbers, 1 of 6, 1 of, yeah, we can even do it that way, but this is just overkill now. Let's see. Please enter number . Okay, so now we've added num numbers there as well. So I could simply just go add how many numbers? 3. And it says, please enter number 1 of 3. Then it's 2, 2 of 3, 5, 3 of 3, 7. And your number is 14, and your sum is 14. Questions? No questions? Yes. String. It has the same properties as a text box. So everything that's in, you'll see number here has its input box, but I've converted it into an integer. Questions? No questions. Okay, so let's go back to this. So we have a second add. So the first add uses an if statement. How many times does an if statement execute? Once. Once it gets to the bottom, it's done, right? It waits for the next time you press a button. We have identified that pressing buttons is not fun. We don't like pressing it multiple times. So we'd like for the program to run for as long as we have not finished doing what we're doing, right? Is that the general consensus? There enters a while loop. Good. So a while loop is part of repetition. It is a loop that will run for as long as a certain condition is true, right? Just like in an if statement where we say, if our counter is less than numbers. So with a while loop, we will say, while counter is less than numbers. And while, okay. But over here, we did have I think we still need this if statement. So before we start with our while loop, we're going to put this if statement. We're just going to get rid of that. And get rid of that because we don't need either one of those. And how many numbers do you want to add? So once we have numbers, we have while. So we're going to say while counter is less than numbers. So for as long as counter is less than numbers, I can basically just copy this from here. Copy, paste it in there. And then we need no, we don't actually need that. Okay, so this is what it looks like. So I'm going to say while counter is less than numbers, counter should be added by 1. And let's get rid of these. Counter should be incremented by 1. After counter is incremented by 1, we need to get the number from the user. And we're going to say, let's make this a little bit more readable. No, wrong place. Online people, are you still with me? I think my computer likes this very much. It's very slow. I'm glad you guys aren't dead. Let's make it more readable, make it a little bit smaller as well. So we get the number, we add that number. If counter is equal to numbers, we don't actually need that if statement anymore because it is eventually going to happen. We can just remove that, put it at the end of the end while, and get rid of this if statement. Okay. Questions with the code that you see in front of you? I haven't run it, but the only thing I changed is the if statement for a while loop, and I've explained what a while loop does. Is anyone confused with this code? Once again, I'm going to get the if numbers is equal to 0. That's the same thing we did with the if statement 1. Numbers will equal to how many numbers do you want to add? And then we're going to say while counter is less than numbers. So this code is going to run, that while loop is going to run. When it gets to, basically what happens is line 58 will go from here all the way to end 1. When it gets to line 64, it reverts back to line 58. Basically, it's going to do that indefinitely until such a point as counter is no longer less than numbers. Does that make sense? Good. Yes. No, the moment you say equals, you are adding one more rotation to the cycle. Because we want to do this for as long as it's less than. Yeah. So let's try run it. Now we're pressing on the second while. I mean the second add. It says how many do you want to add? 5. Okay, right? It says 1 out of 5. I'm going to say 1, enter. The second one already appeared. It's not waiting for me to press a button. It went down and said, is counter less than numbers? No, it's not. Second number is 7. Third number is 9. Fourth number is 5. Fifth number is 3. Then it says your answer is 25. Okay, so at this point, if I click on it again, nothing happens. Why is nothing happening? Because num numbers is not 0, so that if statement is not going to execute, right? Because counter is not less than num numbers, so that while loop is not going to execute. The only thing that's going to run there is the sum is and the answer at the bottom. Who's confused? That gentleman over there is definitely confused. He's rubbing his head. Which part of this is confusing you? I know some parts of it is just you need enough time to process it. Unfortunately, I can't assist you with that. But if it's not a time processing thing, but it's a legitimate issue, please do let me know. There's the reason why we do have these tutorials, and it's so that I can assist you with whatever issues you have. So this is the time to ask questions, ladies and gentlemen. Do you get the difference between an if statement and a while loop? Okay, how many times does an if statement run? How many times does a while loop run? For as long as the condition is true, it will run. So this is something you guys are going to run into, and it's going to happen. In your coding career, this is going to happen. What do you think was going to happen if I do this? So how many times will this loop run? Something we call an infinite loop. Okay, so usually there's only one of two ways to stop an infinite loop is if your battery runs out or all the memory in your computer gets eaten up. And then usually that results in an explosion. So please don't do this. Don't try and avoid creating infinite loops. Let's see what happens if we try run this loop. No, the escape button is not going to work. That's not. Remember, it's eating up your memory at that point. Add how many numbers? It doesn't matter. I just want 1. There's nothing that's going to stop this. Right? It's just going to keep on appearing because number is not being incremented. Fortunately for us, we have this input box to stop that process from running continuously. But you're going to have situations where the input box is basically stopping Visual Studios from eating up the rest of my memory. So for as long as if I give it a value and I press enter, it still waits for me to give it an input, right? Which is fortunate in this instance. You're going to have loops that don't have a pause in them. So maybe you're trying to calculate something. So for as long as the answer is not something, keep on calculating. That's where you have the dangerous type of infinite loops. Hopefully when we get there, I can show you what happens in that infinite loop situation. So with this one, hopefully I can just say cancel and it should die. Yes, simple enough. Just cancel it and it dies. But this is why you're supposed to fix or sort out your issues or understand what you're trying to do on paper before you start coding. Because once you have these type of errors, these infinite loops, it's not going to be pretty. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, are there any more questions? I think we're almost out of time, actually. Let's double check that. No, actually, we still have a lot of time. 15 minutes to be exact. Questions, ladies and gentlemen, with what we've done today? Yes. How? So here's the reset button. Okay, then the user will never get to see their answer. It is, but all of that happens in a split second. So right now, if I say, here it is, I'm saying, show me the sum, right? After saying, show me the sum, I'm copying this to say, clear the sum. Run it. I'm trying to add one number, and the number is 100. Showed the sum, then it cleared the sum. Yeah, which is why usually a reset button, even if you check on your calculator, your calculator doesn't say, this answer has been here for too long, I'm going to clear it. It needs to be something that you do by yourself. I get the whole automation thing of saying you want the user to have as little input as possible, but certain things they need to decide if they're done or not. It's not up to you to say they're done now. They need to decide, now I'm done, I'm ready for a new calculation. So imagine if your calculator did that, which showed you the answer for like 3 seconds and decided that that's too long. So now while you're still writing something else, your answer's gone. You need to recalculate it. It's not very efficient. So that's why reset is something you will reserve for a reset button. Yeah. Good. Questions? So can you use a while loop with a text box? So if I said, shouldn't have gotten rid of those text boxes. Come on. If I had that, and over here, instead of number, I say they're going to be an issue. Shouldn't be, right? Let's run it. Let me just say, to make sure it doesn't crash, let me say number is 1. I say add. And it says, how many numbers do you want to add? 100 numbers. Okay. Is that what I wanted to do? What's the issue? What's the problem? Say 5, 2 numbers. What's happening? It's multiplying. What is it multiplying? It's not multiplying anything. It's adding the same number multiple times. Why is it doing that? Yes. So the value in the text box never gets cleared. But the problem is not it doesn't get cleared. Does the while loop give me enough time to go and change the value in the text box? No. So it constantly takes the same value. Okay. And that's because there's no pause. Basically, I'm just saying, well, count that, count that, count that. So now, actually, if I had to create an infinite loop, online people, if you don't hear from me in the next 2 minutes, just know something horrible happened to my computer. I'm just gonna put 5 over there and say add how many numbers, let's say 5 numbers, enter. Okay, it's still working because that little memory thing there is still going up. Still doing stuff, but I can't move it because I can't do anything with this. Online people, can you still hear me? Hello? I don't think they can hear me. Okay, they can still hear me. Great. But do you see how that memory, unfortunately, I can't move this thing in the middle here because it's still processing. But we're going to be here for a while. We're going to be here until my RAM gets eaten up because it's doing this calculation over and over and over and over again. But fortunately for you guys, they have thought this through. So Visual Studio has something called a sandbox memory. Has anyone ever heard of that term? Sandbox memory. So basically what happens is in the beginning when you execute Visual Studios, your computer asks Visual Studios, how much memory do you want? And Visual Studios goes, give me all of it. And your computer goes, no, I'm not giving you all my memory. How much memory do you need? And in this case, I think Visual Studios was given process memory in megabytes, something like 21 megabytes was given to Visual Studios for it to eat up and play with as much as it wants. At this point, it's eating up all of that memory. So eventually what's going to happen is it's going to eat up all of the allocated memory it has and come to a standstill where it can no longer process any more of that memory and it will crash and die. That's the fun part about Visual Studio. So your computer is not likely to crash as a result of an infinite loop using Visual Studios, but other coding languages don't have these type of mechanisms to say, this is as far as you go. For instance, in third year, you guys are going to be working in Computer Science 3, for those of you that have computer science, you're going to be working with assembly language, and you're going to be talking to the registers that are directly on your machine. If you had to create an infinite loop on assembly, that's how you crash your computer. That's how it overheats and burns up. But yeah, basically, the best way to stop this is just by stopping the debugging, because it's going to run like this forever, maybe until it finishes either one of two things. It finishes its memory or it finishes my battery. Yes.
Can you explain to me, so what's happening again? What's actually happening right now?
What is happening right now? So we have our line 58. What does line 58 say?
Our count is less than num number.
Okay, what's the value of num numbers? In this instance, what's the value of num numbers? What's the value of count? Count is 0, right? So basically we're going from line 58 to the end of the while loop and then back to the top again. So it's basically going, what's counter? 0. What's num numbers? 5. Is counter less than 5? Yes. Run this code. Goes back. What's counter? 0. What's num numbers? 5. Run this code. What's counter? 0. What's num numbers? 5. Let's run this code. That's basically what it's doing right now in the background. Because I am not incrementing counter. Counter will never be more than num numbers because counter is always 0. That's why it's called an infinite loop. Whenever you're creating in a while loop, you need to create a situation where every time the loop runs, your condition gets less and less true to a point where it becomes false. In this case, I'm not changing my condition at all. So it's going to run forever. You get that? Okay, so that's why if usually right now we have counter, we are working with counter. So within the while loop, we need to make sure that somehow counter is increasing to a point where it will no longer be less than num numbers. But currently counter is 0 and we're not incrementing counter in there. So we're just going to keep doing this forever because that condition is never going to be true. And it's been running now for 5 minutes. It hasn't died yet. I'm very disappointed in the fact that it's still running. But yes, are there any questions, ladies and gentlemen? We have about 5 minutes left. Okay, if there are no questions, this is the end of today's tutorial. For fun, I'm just going to leave it running and see how long it's going to crash.